I was asked if this was a joke. Young policewoman as she emerged from the James, the mocking-looking patrol car Harris, who is 82, stayed motionless on his motorcycle, hands steadily on the handlebars, his serene gaze focused on the officers exchanged impatient glances. Looks at the registration and license and obtains. Now that she got off the bike, sir. Her tone was strong. With one hand, she donned mirrored sunglasses, already leaning on her, weapon in her holster. They were unaware that in merely AA captain led 50 soldiers for a few minutes, would travel to the Humvees in search of the person who had the audacity to halt James Harris. James Harris has begun rising at 5 in the morning, daily. In the morning for the previous 40 years of discipline are firmly ingrained in his. However, his tiny property is roughly 10 miles away. Yesterday, John from 1978 was outside of town. The Deere tractor malfunctioned and separated off the. Harris is fully aware with the hydraulic system, which portion has been fixed for 42 years. A man learns to recognize machines. Each bolt and gear in the ancient rusted Harris keeps a 1970 in the garage. The engine of the Harley-Davidson shovel head roars like thunder, unconcerned with. According to appearances, the bike gets him at 82. That's sufficient for where he has to go. He outperforms most men in their reflexes in the 20s, honed by decades of military instruction, ever cognizant of heiser situational awareness of the environment that remained with him. But naturally, nobody observes that when they only view an old irony. In life is brutal, like a man on an old bike. People who have the most to teach are frequently those who appear to be without anything to mention that the traffic light changed to red at town. Harris's entrance halted at the petrol station next to the Harley, where the engine was kept filled up, rumbling a continuous, deep sound that reverberated between residences and retail establishments that the original 1970 Harley shovelhead's roar became silent as soon as he noticed flashing. Behind him, Police Lights Officer Ava Johnson, the mirror officer, approached the bike with lengthy, self-assured strides, mirrored sunglasses, age 28 years, age 3. "Is this a joke?" she asked while on the city patrol. Stated in a derisive manner as she stepped, "Sir, exit the cruiser and turn off that." At the moment, Harris didn't move at all, hands stable on the bike while sitting on it. Handlebars, serene eyes fixed on the officers, exchanged impatient glances. Examines the license, registration, and Step. Johnson's voice now, off the motorcycle, was firmly holding her with one hand already. Firearm. He gave the papers to, without hurrying to keep everything tidy. Arranged within a dilapidated brown Johnson's leather wallet, examined the authorization with 82-year-old suspicion. "Don't you believe it's a bit too late for you to be riding a David Lopez?" A motorcycle police approached. He smiled as he glanced at the bike from bottom to top. "This Harley is older, compared to my dad, who looked at all those rusty hands." Johnson, on the bike, "Sir." Feet apart, ordered the search was not required, and despite knowing it, they both went ahead and did it. A small group of people started to whisper, filled the air. "Where are you, Mr. Harris?" "Reside on a farm close by, just off the highway." Johnson, by himself, exchanged. A Lopez looked at it and said, "Another old man. Are you confused? Do you have any family?" "Whoever looks after you, yes. I have been taking care of myself for 82 years. However, don't you believe it's risky till you're old enough to ride that motorcycle? Could result in an accident that injures someone." Harris remained quiet, his gaze focused on the hands of the horizon clasped behind his back. "Sir, I'm speaking with you. Don't you believe you should listen and then respond to me? It's reckless to ride an outdated bicycle." "Lopez leaned in like that for your age, I believe," he whispered to Johnson. "Perhaps he is a little deaf to see him." Merely standing there and hardly answering, Johnson spoke louder. "Mr. Harris, do you hear me and know what I'm saying?" Claiming that as the audience rose, so did the voices. Poor old man. These police officers don't have. He does appear to have better things to do. Bewildered, someone ought to contact his relatives. The world broke apart as usual, between judgment and compassion, particularly when we are unfamiliar with someone's. Harris stayed mute and closed the story. For a few moments, his eyes took a deep breath. He had encountered much more dire circumstances than this in much more hazardous locations, having far more dire repercussions, but that was more than half a century ago, and he was another elderly man being degraded. In people at the petrol station across the street, Marcus, the station's owner, stopped wiping a 58-year-old Gulf War veteran down the gasoline pump years old. He was aware that James Harris had been filling up right away. Always spent 15 years at that station courteous, and consistently makes his payments on schedule. Continually saying something nice about Marcus witnessed the humiliation taking place, and he reached for the phone as his blood began to boil, and called the adjacent military installation at High. "This is Marcus from Fort Carson. I need to talk to an officer, Williams. On duty, and returning across the border is urgent." "Officer." The situation on the street was becoming worse. Johnson was now speaking louder, clearly annoyed by Harris's lack of response. "You will have to accompany us, sir." At last, Harris addressed the station and shared his quiet, low voice, and what for improper conduct and neglecting to appropriately react to a police. She stopped, "Officer," and then added, "You as well. Require a medical assessment prior to even considering getting on that motorcycle." Harris gave her the same look once more. He had formerly trained with patients, hundreds of similar young troops. The tolerance he had displayed to the 18-year-old recruits that showed up for boot camp, believing they were already fully informed. "Let me try," Lopez replied. "About life, Ava." "Harris, you are aware of our worry, correct? That kind of bike riding by a man your age, for whom could it be dangerous? For other motorists I've been traveling with, I haven't been involved in an accident in 65 years. Yes, but things are slower now." Harris's eyesight impairment and reflexes could have clarified that his reactivity was examined 6 months prior during his yearly medical examination that he undergoes each day when his coordination surpasses. He could have said it to most younger males, all of it, but he didn't have to demonstrate any information to anyone over the phone. Using the Marcus provided an explanation of the circumstances. "One of our fellow veterans is disregarded by James, the local police. I've known Harris, who is 82, for he has been an honest man for 15 years, publicly ridiculed for simply riding his." The cop on the opposite end of the bike line abruptly altered his voice. "Did you say, James Harris? Wait a moment. Mr. Williams, hold your eyes for a second. We are deploying a unit based on the circumstances. Do not allow them to do anything at this time, until we get to Colonel Harrisonable, to provide you with information. Over the phone, however, we'll arrive there in 15 minutes. After the call ended, Marcus approached the coal. James, his heart was racing, had never brought up his military position. Across the street, things got to an entirely new degree of ridiculousness. Officer Johnson had now determined that Harris must be admitted for a mental health assessment. "Mr. Harris, I will require for you to board the car we're going to. I'm not going to the hospital for an assessment." "Are you saying that you're not going?" "This is an order-based process rather than a request." Johnson paused on what law? "There's no legislation that permits the detention of an old man only for riding an elderly motorbike. There is no law requiring a psychological assessment without a sufficient, because she was now in too deep with people. Backing down while shooting would entail elder protection while acknowledging poor judgment legal actions that jeopardize his personal safety for the first time. Risk." Harris grinned. Tiny, nearly imperceptible smile that is friendly, that results from identifying cleverly constructed deception. He had heard a lot more intricate lies from adversaries, much more. "I have a question for you, dangerous Officer Johnson. Would like to know how many years you have been." Johnson didn't enjoy the tone of the service, or what Mr. Harris asks in the car. "I'm not going now. And I'll have." Marcus continues to observe Marcus using force. Something stirred across the street. He harbors admiration for whichever James Harris was, the one who truly had incredible bravery that the audience sensed there. They knew something, therefore, tension increased. Something significant was going to occur, and they were a few miles down the road. Fast, James was being approached by cars. Harris was unaware, but assistance was on the way. How the sound began, with a loud roar of 12 Humvees with engines rushing around the bend, raising dust as they got closer. The automobile stopped in 50 soldiers in a semicircle around the site, emerged from the lead of the Humvee's vehicle. A captain of the army emerged. George Ferrell, age 55, is 22 years old. Active service, he approached. Directly, James Harris is utterly disregarding the. He halted 3 meters away from local officers and shouted a salute to Colonel Harris. Like a grenade, the colonel struck the air. Lopez and Johnson exchanged frantic "Hello, sir. We were told that there was. There seems to be a miscommunication here." Frell turned for the first time to the policeman. His gaze pierced like a dagger, and who dared to Colonel Harris Johnson attempted to Johnson local recovery control officer. "Stop this man because Ferrell, the gentleman," raised his voice to 50. Soldiers stepped in unison, advance a natural gesture of assistance for their commander captain. "I had no idea he was in the military. This man was in Vietnam for 3 tours, conducted intelligence activities in Afghanistan and the Gulf individually, instructed hundreds of officers in the US Army. You stop this man, including me." Contains 2 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars, including 4 clusters of oak leaves and a Distinguished Service Cross Coal. Harris is regarded as a living mythology inside the American military soldiers arrived from around the nation. To receive instruction from him, Frell turned back to Officer Johnson. "You showed disrespect to our honored combat veteran who dedicated 60 talents, years of his life while serving your nation." Lopez attempted to intervene. "But we were just. Your responsibility is to safeguard while we perform ours. Ensure that an elderly man is not degraded in." The change in the crowd was cell phones were still in use at the time. Recording, but now respectfully not mock the remarks, which had entirely altered the unfortunate man who was terrible. That officer truly went against the line. Johnson took a stride toward Harris. "I apologize, Sir Colonel Harris, for not Officer Johnson. May I make you an offer? Some advice. Never pass judgment on others, sir. By looking at them, you can't tell what conflicts they faced, what wounds they transport." The message reverberated within, not only for Johnson, but for everyone observing, and the colonel was approached by the filming Frell. "Do you require escort services for anything?" "No, captain, for transportation, but thank you for coming, sir. We'll be here forever." Harris always made his way back to his Harley. Soldiers stood while the engine was started, in alignment, forming a corridor of honor when he departed on horseback. An hour later, at Sheriff Smith of the local police station, 2-year-old with 15 years of workplace experience receives the sheriff of the military base called. "We need Smith Captain Frell at Fort Carson. To discuss this morning's event, I already know. I've talked, Captain." Involving officers Lopez and Johnson and what will be the Smith, hesitated because he had known Ava. "Johnson was a good officer for 5 years. Please allow me to be honest. Dedicated captain. One of my policemen erred in judgment. To be clear, Sheriff, it's not a crime. Colonel Harris is not seeking retribution. Instead, he's no one he doesn't want to ruin is being sued. Anyone's profession. But as military personnel, our veterans cannot be accepted by this facility." Being handled in this manner, Smith recognized the political weight of the message repercussions of institutional pressure that beyond a local precinct in scope. "What do you recommend that a training course be created? Together with us, your officers will come to our base to find out what it really means to serve this nation. 1 week from now, Captain. It will be finished." Sheriff Smith of the municipal precinct assembled every officer for an everyone's emergency meeting is beginning. "We are putting a new protocol into effect today for field trips, and everyone will be undergoing military training base." Ava Johnson got up, apprehensive. "Co-workers, I made the error of disrespecting a man who merits our greatest affection, admiration, but I gained further knowledge. More significant than protocols and rules, I discovered regarding human dignity, as she glanced at her fellow officers, each individual we encounter on the street. This tale is about treating everyone with respect, particularly the elderly with simple, before presuming that someone is listening. Show respect by asking. Prior to days later, Officer Ava Johnson was judged, traveled along Highway 340. It was easy to heart-pound the property. Nevertheless, a white-painted wooden porch with seats for rocking John's yard is full of vibrant flowers. Adjacent to the barn is a Deere tractor. Under the tractor, Harris was in a working on the grease-stained coveralls. His Harley was situated in a hydraulic system. A big tree's shade caused Johnson to pull, climbed into the patrol car, and inhaled deeply. Went over to Harris's workplace. Harris, Colonel, slipped out of. He cleaned his hands beneath the tractor using "And can I assist you, old rag cop Johnson?" "If it's okay with you, sir, I come to discuss. I just made a cup of coffee for you. Fresh pot in the small kitchen." Harris filled 2 blue cups with coffee. He sat at an antique wooden table with ceramic mugs, motioned Johnson to take a seat at the table. "I have a question for you, officer," across from him. "A few. Naturally, people wonder why you became a..." Officer Johnson wasn't anticipating that my goal was to assist others in making a "How many differences exist in the community? Accidents brought on by senior drivers have." You actually replied to the majority of the mishaps I witness are brought on by younger drivers speeding while intoxicated and texting. Harris smiled softly. "But why did you believe that I was the issue?" Johnson. The truth was too difficult to answer. Harris stood clearly and too painfully and went to the window and observed his cows. Respect for pasture grazing isn't obtained solely by a rank or uniform. It's earned regardless of how you treat other people. She gazed out the window at their age. She discovered Harris owned a motorcycle, spent more time riding that bike than she had been alive since the Harley-Davidson of 1970 still produced noise, still appeared aged and rusty, but it continued to function, and Harris needs to go to that. There were still roads for motorcycles to go. Therefore, Colonel Harris did. So do we all. Click like if you like this story. Click and sign up for the channel so you don't overlook